the moon has always been a place of mystery, silence, and endless shadows waiting to be uncovered. For most of us, it is just a glowing object in the night sky. But for Charles Duke, it became something far more personal and haunting than the world ever realized. At 89 years old, Duke finally admits there are truths hidden behind the official Apollo story. And those truths are not the same ones NASA has been telling for decades. His story begins long before he stepped onto the lunar surface, when his calm Southern voice guided Neil Armstrong during that historic descent on Apollo 11. Few realize that without Duke's steady hand in mission control, Armstrong's one small step may never have been possible. But destiny had even greater plans for Duke, because just 3 years later, he would leave mission control behind and become the youngest man to walk on the moon himself. Apollo 16 was different from the earlier missions. It was not about planting flags or rehearsing history. It was about exploring uncharted lunar highlands that no human eyes had ever seen. And it was there, among the barren craters and jagged ridges, that Duke began to notice things that would follow him for the rest of his life. When he first set his boots into the gray powder, he felt the same awe every astronaut describes. But mixed into that awe was something darker, something he could not explain. He felt it almost instantly, a deep and unsettling sensation of being watched, as though the moon itself was aware of him and his every movement. At first, he brushed it off as nerves or imagination, but as the hours passed, that uneasy presence never faded. It only grew stronger. Even his commander John Young seemed to sense it, though the two never said much, hiding their unease behind quick jokes over the radio. But in the quiet moments, when their microphones clicked off and they were left alone in the void, the feeling of unseen eyes returned, heavy and unshakable. The first time Duke realized something might truly be wrong was when he caught sight of movement on a distant ridge. It wasn't John, it wasn't the rover, and it wasn't a shadow caused by sunlight, because shadows on the moon don't move like that. Whatever it was, it glided across the surface, fast and silent, disappearing the moment he turned his head to look directly at it. NASA would later dismiss such claims as reflections or visual illusions caused by the visor. But Duke knew in his bones this was not a trick of the light. He had seen something real, something alive, and the memory of that silent figure burned into him even when the surface itself showed nothing. Later, as he and Young worked on gathering samples, something even stranger occurred, something that defied science itself. Through their headsets, they both heard a metallic crack, sharp, clear, and unnatural, like steel striking stone in an airless world where sound should be impossible. There was no atmosphere to carry noise, no way for echoes to exist, and yet both men heard it at the same moment, undeniable and chilling. Years later, Duke would stop describing it as a sound at all. Instead, he called it a transmission, something that entered their suits, or perhaps even their minds. Whether it was a signal, a warning, or something else entirely, Duke could never say, but he knew it came from somewhere outside their mission. As the days went on, he began noticing patterns in the dust, lines too straight and too deliberate to be the work of random impacts. They looked like markings, designs etched into the lunar soil, faint but unmistakably geometric, as if someone or something had left them there long ago. He wanted desperately to photograph them, but Mission Control urged him forward, pushing to stay on schedule and avoid delays. That moment has haunted him for decades, because to Duke it felt like NASA didn't want him looking too closely at what was in front of him. Officially, Apollo 16 was about geology, craters, and rocks, but unofficially, there were whispers of transmissions that never made it to the public record. Some conversations were cut short, Others shifted onto encrypted medical channels that only a few were allowed to monitor, and still others disappeared entirely. When Duke later compared the official photographs to the ones he remembered taking, he swore details had been altered or removed. Anomalies, he recalled, were missing. Shapes in the distance, strange reflections on metallic surfaces, objects in the sky that had no logical explanation. One image that never left his memory was a visor reflection he noticed while adjusting his helmet, where the rover appeared beside him. But so did another figure. Tall, motionless, and distinctly not human, the figure stood on a ridge as if silently observing, only to vanish when Duke spun around to face it. For years, he told himself it must have been imagination. But imagination does not follow you home and return night after night in dreams. And the dreams came relentlessly, vivid and terrifying, filled with towering structures rising from lunar dust and faceless watchers standing in endless silence. He would wake in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, shaken by visions that felt more like memories than dreams. Officially, the Apollo program ended because of budget cuts and waning public interest. But Duke has long believed there was another reason. He suspects that what they encountered on the moon convinced decision-makers that humanity was not ready to return, that it was safer to stay away. When asked directly if he believes in extraterrestrial presence, Duke often pauses, his eyes betraying truths he won't fully speak. All he will say is this: "I saw something I can't explain, something I will never forget." Among the rocks and dust, he remembers a boulder split perfectly in half, as if cut by a machine far beyond human capability. He recalls soil disturbed in deliberate patterns, too organized to be accidents, hinting that they were not the first visitors to that land. Other astronauts hinted at similar moments: strange lights, unexpected communications, unexplained silences in the radio feed. Amateur operators back on Earth intercepted fragments of transmissions, voices that sounded strained, frightened, or abruptly silenced as lines went dead. Were these the times when astronauts reported the unexplainable, moments carefully hidden from public ears to preserve the illusion of control? Duke believes so, and he believes NASA's silence was not ignorance, but intentional. A wall built to protect the world from a truth too heavy to bear. Because if humanity knew the moon was not empty, that something had been there before us, the questions raised would change everything we believe about ourselves. As the years passed, Duke carried these memories in silence, but with age, the weight of secrets grew too heavy to keep. He admits that each time he looked back at Earth hanging above the horizon, he felt not comfort, but judgment, as though unseen eyes watched alongside him. It was as if the moon itself was alive, not just a barren rock, but a stage where humanity had trespassed into a story far older than our own. Now, in his final years, Duke no longer shields himself with silence, instead telling the world what he has always feared to say. His words are simple, but devastating. We were not the first to set foot there. If true, the implications are staggering, because it means the moon is not merely a satellite, but an ancient monument holding secrets beyond time. It could be a graveyard, a warning, or even a beacon. But whatever it is, it means humanity is not alone. Perhaps those shadows Duke saw were the remnants of a civilization long gone, or perhaps they were guardians still present, waiting and watching. Whatever the answer, Duke is convinced that when humans return to the moon, we may finally learn the most terrifying truth of all: that we are not explorers, not pioneers, not the first bold souls to walk its surface, but intruders trespassing in a place that was never ours. The moon remains there still, cold, silent, and watching. waiting for the day we return to uncover what has always been hidden. And when we do, the question will no longer be what Charles Duke saw, but whether humanity is ready to face what has been waiting for us all along. Because one man's haunting memory may soon become humanity's shared nightmare.